Welcome to Nuances, Beyond First Impressions with the Asian Diaspora.
I'm Ariadna Milla, a Filipino American from a small town on the southern border in Texas.
I'm Sherilyn Lee, a new American with Chinese Mauritian roots.
Together, we wanted to create a safe space where everyone feels welcome to learn more about the AAPI community.
We hope that through the personal stories we'll hear, we'll all get a glimpse of the humanity behind the stereotypes, how we have so much in common in some ways and so little in other ways.
Before we get into our conversation with Tonie, we do want to take a second to define some terms that are used throughout that conversation. The first being heteronormative and heteronormativity, which refers to a worldview that promotes heterosexuality as the norm. It's based on this attitude that heterosexuality is the normal expression of sexuality. The second term that we want to define is masc presenting, which is short for masculine presenting. And this is just a way to describe someone who expresses their gender in a more masculine way. If someone's feminine presenting, then they would express their gender in a more feminine way. And the next term we have is diaspora. This word is in our podcast title. We use this word quite a lot throughout many of our episodes, and it just refers to the dispersion of any people from their original homeland. So if you are an Asian person living in Australia, then you would be part of the Asian Australian diaspora. And the final term that we want to define is BIPOC, which is an acronym that stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. So hope you learn a lot from our conversation with Tonie. It was such a great conversation getting to talk with them. Without further ado, here we go.
Today, our very special guest is Tonie. Tonie is doing their very best to make you cry in all the best ways. The LA native writes and produces each synth pop track from the comfort of their skylit home studio in Brooklyn, New York. The perfect backdrop for the emotional vulnerability that colors their lyrics. Proudly Vietnamese American, nonbinary, and themselves. Welcome, Tonie.
Hey, yo, what's up? Hi.
Hey.
We're very excited to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be here. It's a good happy AAPI. Wow, it's such a mouthful.
I know.
Happy Asian Month.
That's what happens when you try to group too many people in one umbrella term. And now we have this very long acronym.
And I'm hearing it being called API now too, all over TikTok instead of AAPI, which I didn't realize was a thing, but I guess to include non-American Asians.
Interesting.
Oh, okay. Trying to include the whole diaspora. It's not all about America all the time.
Just all of them.
Well, Tonie, why don't you tell us a little bit about your ethnic background?
When you all were going to ask me this question, I thought a lot about it because I feel like I have a very different relationship with being Viet. My parents are Vietnamese. They're refugees, as a lot of Vietnamese American parents are. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I felt very disconnected from my culture. So I can tell you things about like the food. I know some words like household Viet, but especially growing up in LA, in a white affluent town, there's not that many Viet people, not that many Asian people there. So honestly, I don't really feel qualified to answer that question. And I actually struggle a lot with, am I even like Vietnamese enough to answer that? I say I'm Vietnamese American specifically because I grew up in this in-between place of, I know some things, but I don't know my mother tongue that well. I don't really know the traditions that well other than Lunar New Year. I haven't been back, so there's a little bit of connection there, but it took me a long time to even get to this point.
I think that's actually more common than you might think, because I feel the same way.
Yeah,
and,
same here.
You know, I've never been to China. I don't speak any Asian language. I speak French.
Yeah.
I think some of the culture still stays in terms of how you're raised, and we take our shoes off to get in the house, that kind of thing. But yeah, I also don't know how Chinese I am.
Yeah, there's a lot of culture by osmosis. Like I know some terms. Whenever someone's Viet, I'll yell like "Jet," which is oh my god in Viet, or I'll have my hot takes about Viet food like pho is mid-level Viet food. We gotta dig deeper into other foods.
Yeah. Okay, so what is a dish that you would recommend people check out? Because pho is the one that everybody knows.
If you want more soup stuff, bún bò Huế. It's a spicy beef noodle soup with crab meat and so good. The soup that takes me back to my childhood is bún riêu, which is like a tomato, crab meat, vermicelli rice noodle soup. And if you want something dry, I like bánh cuốn, which is like a Hanoi thing. The steamed rice rolls like that are in Chinese culture. It's like that, but even thinner with woodier mushrooms and other things. So it's really good and really hard to make. So the craft is also really cool. Yeah.
That's cool. You mentioned Lunar New Year, and Lunar New Year is celebrated by many Asian cultures. I'd like to hear a bit more about how your family celebrates it.
This is a two-part answer. So back when I was in LA and lived with my family, I haven't lived at home for a while, but it was just a lot of lisli, which is the red envelope. Getting money is always nice as a kid, you know. that was one big thing. And then gathering together and eating a huge feast. My mom was the main cook of the family. She hosted everybody. Everyone would come over. All the Asian kids would all gather around the egg roll deep fryer, waiting for the egg rolls to come out fresh and burn our tongues. It was that kind of vibe. The family would just come together. Then in the corner, the aunties and the uncles, especially the white uncles, it would first start super chill. And then they would get super loud as they started talking about politics. And then by the end, people would be screaming at each other. So that's how I grew up celebrating Lunar. I mean, that's every family gathering. But yeah, Lunar New Year is that way. And visiting the cemetery to honor loved ones. That would be another big thing. But I think another important thing is my chosen family. Because what even is it to be Asian American or Asian in the Asian diaspora? I think a lot of people feel disconnected in a lot of ways from their culture. A lot of Asian Americans feel like, oh, we're going to celebrate Lunar New Year in a weird way. We're going to all get together in someone's apartment and bring all our foods. Maybe not even like our culture foods. I don't really cook Viet food. I just cook Asian-ish food. We can do like hot pot, general hot pot. Sit around in a circle talking about trauma. And that's how I'm celebrating Lunar New Year now with my friend. In that way, I'm carrying on my family's tradition. I am my mom in so many ways. Don't ever let her hear that. But I am my mom. Like always gathering people together evening.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You have family who also moved from Vietnam and came to LA.
There's no one back in Vietnam.
Wow.
Either through refugee or darker reasons. But yeah, all my family is in California. My dad's family is in NorCal, Bay Area, San Jose, where all the Viets are. Cupertino. Shout out to Cupertino.
I was there for a while. I worked there for a while.
Oh my God, all the Viet people are there. And then my family is in LA. My mom's side primarily is in LA.
That's cool.
The beach cities area, the west side. I'm from Manhattan Beach, California, if y'all know. Yeah.
That's awesome. So when you were growing up, did you feel like you were different from the people around you? At what age did you realize that you're not the same as the other white kid?
When they started calling me the Asian kid from, oh God, it was like since probably kindergarten.
Wow.
First grade. Yeah, I knew I was different for not a dumb reason, but it just is what it is back then. Full disclosure, I'm non-binary now. Like I knew I was different in that sense, but when I was an Asian boy, quote unquote, not being seen as attractive was a huge thing. Like being seen as like neutral. I remember having a lot of crushes that are unreciprocated. So that's one area that I think a lot about. And that's also problematic. Anyway, we'll dig into that another time. But anyway, that's a hot take with the Asian masculine thing. But that was one thing I thought a lot about. And just how all my achievements were boiled down to me being Asian. They're like, oh, you get A's because you're Asian. That's so funny. I work really fucking hard. Thanks. That was a huge thing in high school that really, really bothered me. And simultaneously, it made me want to be white. For both of those reasons, like I wanted to be seen as attractive and I also wanted to own my accomplishments, especially as a musician. I got a lot of weird comments growing up like, oh, you sound white when you sing. I'm like, what does that even fucking mean? What do you mean I sound white versus sounding black or sounding XYZ? It's always been there, but it wasn't until university that I truly processed it because I was so busy trying to fit in and be seen as something other than Asian, hanging out with mostly white kids. How you're supposed to get out of that, how you're supposed to heal if you're in that environment.
Yeah. Ari and I are just nodding because we have the same problem with the music industry.
Yeah, everything you said, oh my God, I feel that. Especially saying that you sound white, or when I was growing up too, that whole idea that the reason for your accomplishments is because you're Asian. You get A's, you're good in math because you're Asian. Or I would have people say, I wish I was Filipino so that I could be smart. And there were no other Asians in my school. I grew up in a primarily Latino community and their only exposure to Asian people was Filipino. And so I would be the catch-all for all the questions they had about Asian culture and asking if I speak Chinese or what their name is in Chinese. It's like, well, I don't speak Chinese.
Yeah, I feel that's so hard because it's different now and it's super weird. I think a lot of Vietnamese people can resonate with this. If you're a 96 baby, hello millennials, or millennials. When you're growing up, no one really knew about Vietnam. The most notable thing was like the war, which you learned for 2 seconds in school. But now I feel like Vietnamese culture is so much more prolific with fun, like these new and banh mi and all these like newer celebrities. Shout out to all the actors like Kelly Marie Tran and hello. There are more Viet folks in the world, but what's lost in that is how long these things were quote unquote foreign or not cool or not palatable to normal people.
Yeah.
So, and feeling so isolated. Everyone thought I was Japanese. I'm like, what? Oh. It was weird, yeah. And there's a whole nother layer, but wanting to be Japanese because anime was cool and wanting to be understood. What?
Oh my!
So many layers there, right?
Yeah. I don't know if you feel the same way or if you've heard this, but I kind of feel like there's tiers of Asian, like K-pop is huge right now. So everybody wants to be Korean and then Japanese. And I feel like, especially the Southeast Asian culture, like Vietnam and the Philippines, we're not at that place where we're glorified yet. And I still feel like even the K-pop, there's an objectification element to it when people are obsessed with it. Yeah, it feels like we're Asian, but we're not the cool ones that people want to be.
Oh my God. You know what's terrible? Like a new shorthand. If folks don't know, I'm non-binary, but I mask present sometimes. So when I'm mask presenting, and then sometimes, especially on the internet or in person, people will come up to me and be like, "Oh my God, you look so Korean." I'm like, as if that's supposed to make me feel good. I'm like, thanks. I mean, shout out to my Korean friends. I love you. But it's a little weird that that's being used as
a compliment.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, you look like junk.
Weird.
I don't care. I'm not Korean.
Oh my God. It's, in the Philippines too, if you're mestizo or if you look Chinese or Korean, why is that seen as a good thing? Or if you're a light-skinned Asian, it means you're pretty or you're handsome.
And acknowledging my own privilege of being fair-skinned, yeah, I get what they're saying and where that comes from, but still, actually, that makes it more disgusting. What am I saying?
Oh my God. Yeah, everything that you're saying, I know that feeling.
I was at a conference once and they were doing this stupid workshop. Anyways, they were talking about what is the biggest obstacle for you in your career right now? Something that you struggle with. Mm-hmm. And I wrote down that I struggle with being Asian and doing music that doesn't sound Asian. Mm-hmm. And you were supposed to share that with the people next to you. And there are these two white ladies next to me. And I shared it and they're like, well, what about anime music or K-pop? That's pretty hot right now. And it was like, so many layers here. I'm not Korean. I'm not Japanese. And even if I was, this is not what I want to do.
Yeah. They totally missed the point of your...
Yeah. I was like, great.
Yeah.
That was literally it.
Instead of this helping me feel seen, it made me feel even more unseen.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I think we all know, since we're all in the music industry, we all feel that all the time. I walked into a room the other day, and I work in theater a lot, and theater is very white. Love y'all. Thanks for paying me. But it's true. A lot of theater is white. A lot of pop is white. And it's weird walking to these rooms and having to overcome these assumptions about you and the music you're going to make or the person you are. Yeah, weird comment I got the other day was like, oh, you're Viet? Oh, you can probably sing really high because Vietnamese sounds really high. I'm like,
what? How is that?
I've never heard that.
How is that even?
That's...
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's stuff like that people don't understand unless you're BIPOC. And obviously, I feel like every BIPOC person struggles with all these assumptions. Yeah. And that's why I'm like, wow, what would it be like to be white and just walk in and be able to be just...
Oh my God.
I know. I wanted to be white so bad when I was a kid.
Me too. We all did.
I work with a lot of Asian musicians, so I have that space too. But it's hard because if you want to make changes, you have to. This is something I had to learn, especially leaving university. I went to a fairly as left-leaning as a university can get. The student body was left-leaning. I think in our circles, it's really important to have that safe space to make white people jokes and make fun of white people. We're doing that right now. But also, my hot take, you have to work with white people. You have to have allies who have power. I think about that a lot as a music producer. Being a music producer is a super powerful position to be in because you control the music making and where it's going to go and empowering artists. So I think a lot about that. If I'm the Asian person in the room and the non-binary person, queer person in the room, and I have this power, then I have to use it, which means I have to interact with other people who have power, which are typically white people, straight men that you have to educate in order to move forward your own people, the artists you work with. It's a whole chain. And I think that emotional labor is annoying, but really important. And it's really important to not get walled off to other people. Otherwise, we're not going to go anywhere. This is something I'm still trying to figure out. No, it is not our obligation to educate other people, but it is a necessity because we live in a power structure centered around white supremacy. And obviously, there are times where you're just not going to be able to. There's no amount of power.
Some battles can't be won.
Yeah, some battles can't be won. But the more you can fight those battles, and that's why community is so important. So you have that healing space. So when you go back to these rooms, you're like, okay, I can do it. I'm doing it for everyone around me. Yeah.
Can you give examples? What has been successful for you when you're in that space and you're trying to educate somebody? Because I think that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is I think a lot of people want to do better, but they just don't know that they're even doing something wrong in the first place, and how do we approach those people? What has worked for you?
So I can speak more to being non-binary in my they, them pronouns. That has been such a huge journey in learning for me and asserting that in the room. For me personally, it's totally fair because like I said, I'm mass presenting, I totally understand. And pronouns is a very new thing. So what's worked for me is to either say in the moment, hey, actually my pronouns are they, them. Stating it as fact. It's like someone's name, right? If you make it like, oh, actually my name is this, not that. Or just DMing them after or pulling them aside after privately for a one-to-one conversation. I have always been a big proponent of calling in versus calling out. So if it's someone you're going to be working with a lot, just have an honest conversation with them. And most people are pretty receptive. And a little sadistically, I like watching people squirm when they apologize. Because it used to bring me so much anxiety and dread. And it still does, of course. But I think actually people want to do better. And going in with that assumption, I think growing up, going through college, I always had the assumption that people would not want to try and want to be bad or are so stubborn. But honestly, most people I talk to about it are pretty open to, oh, I'm sorry. Let me try again. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I love the calling in versus calling out, which that like I had never heard that before. So I think that's a really cool approach.
Yeah.
You were talking about how navigating those spaces, they, them is a relatively new thing. So for people listening who aren't very familiar and who maybe have not encountered non-binary people, do you want to explain a little bit what that is, what that means?
Sure. I do want to clarify that there have always been people who do not fall within gender lines, but I think when I say new, I mean like in terms of it being more mainstream, there are non-binary folks. So to define non-binary people, I would actually use Alok's definition. So if you want to learn more about being non-binary, I love Alok Menon. Their work is amazing and they explain non-binariness with a lot of love. It's basically someone who doesn't fall between the binary of boy or girl. So I explained it to my mother. I don't feel like a boy or a girl. I am neither of those things. And I've felt that way since I was a young kid. I've never felt like either of those genders fit me. And it's more of an internal thing, honestly. Like, I know that I'm neither. So that's why I use they, them. It's like a compromise, honestly, because language isn't perfect.
Right.
And we live in a gendered world by design. People made it that way. But I just hope that by talking more about being non-binary, that I can allow people to be more themselves, regardless of whatever gender you are. I think, especially nowadays, now that I'm more open about it and talk about it on social media, at my shows, all I want is for people to be comfortable in their skin. So that's a reason why I'm very adamant about they, them pronouns all the time, because it allows people to feel more safe for themselves.
Absolutely. What was it like for you being non-binary in the Asian American community? Because I know that in Asian culture, there's still a lot of people who have a lot to learn. So what was that like for you and how did you navigate that?
Yeah, I think I can navigate more broadly queerness in general, because I don't know if any of y'all resonate with this, but I'm sure someone who's listening is. I was in a lot of Asian American clubs. I was in VSA specifically, Vietnamese Student Associations, that whole scene. And I think we grow up, especially in Vietnamese culture, with a lot of heteronormativity, just like everything's super gendered. My mom was always like, the man's the breadwinner, the woman's the homemaker. Wouldn't you feel emasculated if your girlfriend made more money than you or your wife made more money than you? I'm like, no, actually I wouldn't. That doesn't bother me at all, Mom. It's all those little things that, like, even if you are someone who is socially aware and left, you can't just unlearn that shit. It's really hard if you're taught that as a child. Navigating queerness, there weren't a lot of openly queer people in my life. So I just had to be the person who was queer. And that was really hard. I had a few examples of that. I will say this, though. I did have some. When I was in VSA the first year, there was a trans person who was the president. So I realized, okay, they were that for me. I can be myself. I can talk about queerness and being Viet. Therefore, I must be that for other people. To demystify, humanize. I knew very early on that it was always going to be a battle like that. Yeah. Like, hey, not all men are like this. Or, hey, not all women are like this. And not all men want to fuck women. Sometimes men want to fuck men. What a concept. You can love everybody. Sometimes you don't want to fuck. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think, especially Asian party culture, any Vietnamese conference, there's a huge party, and people are hooking up, or, like, raves. I just think a lot about the sexual script there of people hooking up and men pursuing women. I just always felt disgusted by that people are prescribed these roles, especially that women are not given agency in this. So I thought a lot about that. And a lot of my queerness was spent like teaching people about, hey, actually, it doesn't need to be that way. Mm-hmm. So I realized, okay, men don't need to do this. Men don't need to have these assumptions in dating. And because queer people, what's nice is because everything is so not in media and not scripted, we have to create our own script. So there's a whole culture of consent and everything around that. I think a lot about that, especially now, still now, especially now being non-binary. All these strings are pulling us along in these subtle ways that you have to learn how to break. Or I would hope people want to break. I'm not going to be like, you have to be queer. No, I'm not saying that, but I just think even if you are straight, it is important to really interrogate these lines of, does the man really have to pursue the woman? Is that a thing that you feel like you have to do? Yeah. Do you have to act this way?
A lot of this we've learned over time. And I agree with you. A lot of this stuff, I had no idea growing up. I grew up on this tiny island in the middle of nowhere, and we did not have any queer people that we knew of because it was illegal. And then when I moved to Canada, that's when I started learning about all these things. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Whatever makes you happy, I'm cool with that. And I will try my best to learn and be respectful and call you what you want to be called. I think it's just a matter of exposure a lot of times. It's a little harder with older generations sometimes because they are pretty convinced that they know how things are supposed to work in the world.
Yeah.
But I also have met a lot of older people who are willing to learn. Like my parents, they've never really talked to queer people. But if I tell them, well, this person is gay, they're like, oh, cool. They're not going to be like, this is wrong and they need to be fixed or whatever. Yeah. So I think there is hope. We just got to keep making that more normal.
Yeah. And that's my hope, that we can just exist. This is something I just want to touch on. I get a lot of, you're so brave for being non-binary. You're so brave for wearing a dress out in public. You're so brave. I really don't want it to be that way. I just want to wear what I want to wear and not have it be a big deal. I want to be like, I use they, them pronouns, and people be like, oh, it's fine. I always said that. Like, I always wanted my queerness to be like, I'm pansexual and I also had tacos for lunch. Like, I want those to be on the same level. That's my hope. And I think with queer stuff, it's for sure. I think queerness is a lot more mainstream now, but there's still anti-trans bills in.
I'm very uncomfortable with the term brave because I feel like it's used kind of like backhanded comment a lot of times. When I left my tech job to do music, people are like, oh, you're so brave. Well, no, I don't think I was brave. I just felt like I didn't have a choice if I wanted to be happy in my life. I did what I felt was the best path forward based on examining all the pros and cons and the risks. And it is a calculated risk, but that was the best possible route forward. It's not brave. It's just what made sense. It might not make sense to you, but it makes sense to me. So I feel like brave is thrown around a lot as a way to say, I think you're crazy, but good for you.
It's still othering in a way. It's like, oh, you're doing something that's not normal when it should just be normalized.
Yeah.
Exactly. I felt the same way. Oh my God. Because I also left my software job for music and they're like, oh my God, you're so brave. I wish I could do that. I'm like, well, you could.
You could.
Then do it.
Like, it's fine.
Especially if you were in software, you can build up a nice little blanket before you leave. And it's not as crazy as people think. Just do the math.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we're supposed to be good at math, so that should make sense, right?
That is a myth. I fucking hate math. I don't know how I got through my computer science degree. So bad.
I was the sole Asian person as an English major, and all my Asian friends in college were like computer science, bio pre-med, etc. And I always felt like I was doing something wrong or cheating somehow because I chose English as my major. So they all hated their majors.
But it's hard. It's fucking hard. I have to read like what, 1,000 jillion pages.
Yeah. Oh my God. And then I would hear the, oh, but it's so easy, right? Because it's so subjective. And I'm like, you don't pull these essays out of your ass. You actually have to write them and write them well.
Oh yeah, it's a whole thing. I couldn't stick it out being an English major. I tried. It was so bad. I walked in. My God.
Okay, one other thing that we don't talk a lot about in the Asian community is mental health. And I know you have some opinions to share about that. So why don't we dig into it?
LOL. Yeah, I think growing up, especially in the Asian community, there's so many statistics about how Asian folks struggle the most with seeking mental health resources, the least likely to seek them, being real, the most likely to take their own life, all these different statistics. And it really just boils down to Asian countries didn't have the resources to address mental health issues, and they weren't taken seriously. I can think a lot about Vietnam. How can you worry about depression when there's a war going on? This is kind of a tangent, but related. I think growing up, I resented my parents a lot for not understanding what I was going through and telling me to suck it up and like push it down. Have alligator skin was a huge thing that really got under my skin. That's what my mom would always tell me. Why are you so weak? Have thicker skin. Stop crying. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I also understand, comparatively, if we were to compare trauma, I get it. Leaving your home country to come to a foreign country where you don't speak the language after having just gone through a traumatic experience, yeah, that makes us having depression seem a little weird because we're in the nice country, the nice Western country with resources. But I think it took me a long time to validate my depression because I've had it since I've had suicide ideation since I was, also trigger warning. I've had suicide ideation since I was in 5th grade. So I've lived with depression for a long time.
Wow.
Like wanting to or planning to take my own life so many different times in my life. It just becomes a normal thing. To me, depression's a chronic illness, but it wasn't until I was an adult that I was like, actually, I will seek therapy and it'll be fine. The first time was in university because I had the resources there. And at first it was just because I was going through a rough time with my partner. But then I had like a scare. So I went and saw them again. And that's when I started to process, okay, it's not just a one-time thing. It's a chronic illness. I need to have someone regular and go to a therapist. So after college, when I had money and means and time, that's when I started seeking it. And I just realized how much unlearning I had to do. I felt shame and I felt like I didn't want to change, especially as a music artist. I think there's this whole culture of idealizing the suffering of the artist for their art. And it's total bullshit.
It is.
Yeah.
So much amazing music is written by even emotioned, high functioning people, or people who are just not depressed. I think that's such a huge thing that not to call y'all out, but it's honestly on the fans, right? We need to stop glorifying when our artists are suffering and want to help them. I think it's definitely changing, but in the past, especially the tale of Kurt Cobain dying at 27 and Jimi Hendrix dying. That's so stupid. We want our artists to live longer.
Right.
Yeah.
So there is that part to unlearn of I don't need to suffer to write good lyrics.
Yeah.
I was afraid that I would change if I was antidepressants. I was like, my personality would change. Honestly, it just makes your life more even.
Yeah.
So you can spend more time with your loved ones and spend more time doing the things you love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely hard for Asian communities, I feel. And I think you're right about comparing like the war to now. And because they've been in survival mode for a while, to them, all they have to do is survive, right? You got to have thick enough skin to go through it and just still be around. And I guess it's hard for them to unlearn that now that the threat is actually over. It's still that mentality of, okay, we're tough. We're going to stick this out. We're going to figure it out. It might be painful, but we're still alive. So let's keep going. And I think sometimes it's hard for them to realize that, yeah, you're strong and you're keeping going, but it doesn't have to be so hard.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be painful. You can find joy again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that mentality too of we have to tough it out, that in itself is a trauma response. It's hard when I see my parents who they have such a, not an entirely different worldview. I think as the longer that they've been here, it's changed. But yeah, this idea of having to claw your way through this world that's really unforgiving, I think that's something that's really hard for them to unlearn. I wish that they would work through that.
Yeah, just to plug, I do have a song coming out called If I Took a Pill. And one line in that song I wrote is about my mom. I realized what my mom said when I was a little boy, that even she needed help to find my way back to joy. Much like I have been on this journey, I know my parents are on that too. My mom has sought counseling, and I think that's been really powerful.
Yeah.
And that's what they are going through. And like, it's freeing to know your parents are human and that they're also working through this stuff too. And same for my dad. He had a few near-death experiences throughout the years with his like health and stuff. And he's like, I can't be an asshole to my kids and expect them to be around. So he's like softening like a peach. And I'm just like, okay, our parents have abilities to grow and change. But much like us having to unlearn the trauma they passed on to us, they have to unlearn their actual trauma that they are dealing with. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
For many of us in the Asian American community, our experience is different from our parents.
Yeah.
So there's always this friction where on one hand, we're trying to understand each other, but on the other hand, we're frustrated because each side is trying to tell the other, my way's better, trust me. and that's an additional layer that we have to work with, where I feel like if you're born in this country and your parents were not immigrants, you maybe you'll have a bit less of that.
Yeah, exactly. My freedom is I don't try to change my parents anymore. So I think a huge thing that helped me a lot is in Queer Eye, the show, who was it? It was Karamo, the culture dude. He was like, it's not about coming out to people anymore. It's about bringing them into your queerness. And I've tried to apply that to a lot of my life. So I came out to my mom. When I was pansexual, I came out to her, told her about it. And a lot of the power was with her to accept me. And I want her to accept me and love me for who I am, et cetera, et cetera. It was a lot of that language. But then when I had to, quote unquote, come out to her again as non-binary, I was like, no, I'm going to bring her in. I'm going to tell her that I am non-binary. I am neither a boy nor a girl. And she can choose to accept that or not. Yeah. And I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to wear skirts when I come home and wear makeup. And if my family doesn't like that, well, fuck them. I live in New York. I'm going to be who I am. That's a huge thing that helped my mental health as an immigrant kid, which is to stop trying to expect my parents to change and to just be yourself and then have them deal with it. It's not on you to change yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Or them. Because at the end of the day, you have to live this life and you have to be yourself. They're going to die before you probably. So yeah, that's the dark way I deal with it. Please don't deal with it like that.
I feel like that's just setting healthy boundaries, I feel like. And so I'm in Subtle Asian Traits and Subtle Mental Health on Facebook, and they're so different. Both of, like, those two groups could not be more different. But I think a common theme I see when people are struggling with their parents, and this is something that I've struggled with too, is I've wanted them to accept me versus I set boundaries and teach them what I'm willing to accept and not accept. Yeah, I think boundaries is something that has been big for me to learn. And it's been difficult too, because I just really want them to mold to what I wish they were. But setting boundaries is I'm just accepting them for who they are, but they know what I'm willing to deal with and not deal with.
Yeah, if they accept those boundaries, but then you just have to roll with it.
And then the guilt too associated with setting those boundaries. It's
so real. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky with my parents. They weren't very conservative in any way. They're pretty accepting, but sometimes, especially when I left for music, they were like, okay, fine, if it's what you want to do. But I still felt like they were a little disappointed. And working through that, trying to get them to see that I'm not doing something crazy and that I actually know what I'm doing, took a little bit of time. But we're getting there.
We're getting there. Yeah, my parents support, but don't understand why I'm doing what I do. But I think the more I tell them about my life, they understand more. Side note, it sucks. They don't really understand it until you can put a name to it. I played off-Broadway, and they're like, oh, now I get it. That's not even the main thing I do, but I guess that's fine.
Yeah, I feel like the only time they go into support mode is once you've made it. But then to get there, it's very isolating.
They just need to be able to explain it to their aunties, the other aunties. I get it. I get it, Mom.
I know. Oh, the questions at the Filipino parties, like, what does your kid do? And the comparisons.
Yeah, I get it. I know I'm not a pharmacist or whatever. That's easy to understand, but is it so weird to be like, my kid, wow, they can't say son anymore. I hope they probably still do. But my kid makes music for other artists. And is that hard to explain? I don't understand.
Yeah, I think it's so frustrating that what's considered valuable in our parents' eyes is what makes the most money, which again goes back to the survival. But with capitalism, whatever's in demand, that's what's considered valuable. And so art just always gets the short end of the stick.
Hold up. Let me tell you, being a music producer does make money, and a lot of money. Not saying I'm doing that well, but in general, per project, It's a lot of money. People don't. If you're thinking about going into music, there's money to be made. It's not like everyone's fighting for scraps. There's so much room in the industry for everybody.
And that's the thing too. I think a lot of us growing up didn't have role models, didn't have people we could ask, is that even a viable thing? So to our whole community, it just seemed so out of reach, especially when you don't see anybody who looks like us on the charts or anything like that. Even going into computer science, I had family members tell me, don't go into IT, it's too saturated. And like they have no idea what the difference between IT or computer science is. And they just heard that from some other auntie. They came and told it to me. And I'm supposed to make a career choice. A lot of it comes from a good place, but is very sadly misinformed. And it's just a fear. They want what's best for us, but they don't know enough to actually give us good advice.
Right.
But you've had some success stories and some mentors that you've met along the way that you'd like to highlight. So why don't we talk about those people who have made it possible for you?
Yeah. I think I'm very thankful in my life that early on in my career, and this is such a privilege, early on in my career, I was able to see other Asian people making a living doing music. Not Justin Bieber level. My first role model was this woman named Tammy Ying. She gave me my first music job. She ran a music school. She was making a living. She was living in New York, near Lincoln Center as a musician. That's really powerful to see. Even though it's, she's teaching, that's not exactly what I want to do, but wow. Being able to live in New York City on a musician's income, huge. Like just being able to see people like that, working musicians. Like I met session players who played in theater or played for other artists. That's powerful too. Again, you don't need to be super famous because that's what my mom's main conception of being in the music industry was. Like, you have to be a famous artist, like to make any sort of living. I'm like, no. And now that I'm further along in my career, I quit in 2019. So it's almost 3 years now. Wow, that's wild. Almost my 3-year anniversary. But now I make entirely my living through music. And that's just through a lot of experimentation and trying different things. When I first quit my job, I thought I wanted to be a songwriter, like Julia Michaels. Go in the writer room, hash it out, write a hit, hope it blows up. But then I found my love for music producing just because someone asked me to produce their music and I had been doing it for myself. I'm like, I guess I might as well. And they paid me. I'm like, actually really enjoy it. And then I was able to keep upping my rates and turn it into a business. That's a huge thing. I think, I don't know, like I talk to people who are going into the music industry and everyone wants a very clear cut path, which I totally understand. But I think the most beautiful part about music in any creative industry is the ability to move and try different sources of income and see what really resonates with you at this moment, right? I am a music producer and a music teacher and a session player, but lately I've been really loving session playing. I love playing for other people. I love playing guitar and band and helping artists performing. So I'm learning that in real time. And you just can't do that if you're so set on one thing, which is so hard because you have to have faith in the universe. It's hard. But as long as you understand, okay, I've like made enough money to explore, it'll be fine. Not always relying on that steady source, not always needing a number every month to live on, and saving money so you can explore and so you can navigate the ups and downs of your income and industry and different trends. That's really, really important. I think that's just good business, right? Have savings. So it combines, right? It combines my parents, what they instilled in me was like to save money, but also you can take risks in these very calculated ways to find a better life.
That's the key, calculated risk. We're not crazy. We're thinking about it.
Exactly. I'm not like, I don't know, fuck everything. And that's the same thing for right now. I'm really into being an artist. I think I've been inspired by a lot of my new mentors. So Alex Wong, shout out to him. I was really struggling. I was like, I feel like I'm a music producer, but I want to do more artist stuff, but then I want to invest more into being a mixing and mastering engineer. It's like, dude, just do whatever you feel at the moment. Invest in what you want to do, and you can change. And you can do all these things, but you don't always have to be so clear cut. So right now I'm like, okay, actually I want to put more into being an artist. So this summer, I'm going to say no to things, which is something I'm working on. Put more into being an artist and investing in that income stream, which is wild because I never thought that would be an income stream.
Yeah.
Crazy. But yeah.
We will be playing one of your songs at the end of the episode. So I'm excited for people to hear that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my success story. The success story is like, it's not about single place and time. It's about a feeling. And I think anyone who wants to be a freelance anything doesn't have to be be music or arts or whatever. It can be like a freelance software engineer.
Yeah.
I think the biggest success is being able to control everything in my life. Being able to say yes and no to certain projects, being able to have a podcast interview in the middle of the day, being able to play a show and take out my whole day and set my schedule around what I want to do. I think that was the biggest thing I hated most about being in a corporate environment, which is your time was not owned by you. It was owned by a corporation. So I love controlling my own schedule because I'm a control freak and it's the best.
And congratulations on making that happen.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, congrats.
All right, we're going to have 5 rapid fire questions and then we'll wrap it up with your outro. Ari, do you want to ask
Sure.
rapid fire questions?
Yeah. So these are just one-word answers or just really quick. So what was the first language that you learned?
English.
Okay. Me too. What language do you speak with your parents?
English and Viet-ish. Yeah. But I'm not talking Viet to them. They're talking Viet to me and interspersing with English.
Yeah. What is a stereotype about your culture that is not true or does not apply to you?
Our favorite food is not pho and banh mi. There's way more.
Okay. What is a stereotype about your culture that is actually true for you?
Viet people love Henny.
And my last one, what kind of art do people expect you to make versus what you actually make?
Oh, fuck. What do people expect me to make? I don't know. I guess a white person might expect some Asian shit. Okay, yeah. People would probably expect me to make K-pop, but I am nowhere near that. I make alt pop. Loud, but a little edgier.
Yeah.
Lately, I've been into hyperpop. So that's going to be really fun to bring into the world. Like a non-binary hyperpop Asian person. Like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is that? I guess it could be Rina Sawayama if she went a little hyper. But
We need that in our life, so we can't wait for it.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It was awesome having you on. And before you go, where can people find you? Give us all the plugs.
Yeah, I have a single coming out on May 13th called If I Took a Pill. It's a song about my struggles with depression and learning to accept that. Accepting help and asking for help is strength. You can find me at Tonie, TONIE.wave, like the wave file, on all socials, so like Instagram, TikTok. You can also go to itstonie.com if you want to see my website and, I don't know, make music with me. I'm also a music producer. Would love to work with you. And then, yeah, just honestly, I'm always a DM away. I love answering DMs, I think, especially other folks who resonate with my story about being non-binary or Asian. I'd love to get to know you. So please send me a DM. I would love to chat. And join my mailing list and you get a free song.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, this was fun.
This was so much fun.
Yeah, I hope you had a good time. Keep us posted on your new releases and stuff. And whenever you have stuff out, send it to us. If we can plug it in the show, we'll do it.
Yeah.
I love that.
All right. Well, we'll let you go. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Nuances podcast. But before we end the episode with a preview of Tonie's song, here are our takeaways. Number 1, you can call people in instead of calling them out. You have to have allies to have power. Tonie talked about how important it is for us to do the emotional labor of educating the people we work with on a day-to-day basis and to do it with grace and empathy. Number 2, instead of coming out, Tonie prefers to bring them in. Trying to change your family or your parents can be a lot more stress than it's worth. Acceptance brings more peace. You can't change your parents, but you can change how you respond to them, and you can set healthy boundaries to maintain a good relationship with them. Number 3, success is feeling at peace. For some of us, it's about not worrying about where the next paycheck's going to come from. For others, it's about having control and flexibility over your schedule and your career. Pursuing a creative career may seem like a spontaneous choice, but actually many of us have put a lot of thought and planning into it before making that transition. And there are lucrative avenues out there. Number 4, when there is no script, there's an opportunity to define your own culture and make it better. The queer community has done a great job fostering a culture of consent that is only beginning to emerge in some heteronormative settings. Number 5, just because we can survive emotional pain does not mean we should endure it. Seeking help with mental health is not a sign of weakness. It requires a lot of strength to take the steps necessary to regulate our emotions, but the benefits far outweigh the initial discomfort. Number 6, Tonie has found new ways to celebrate their unique cultural blend as an Asian American. Embracing the fact that their experiences and connection with Vietnamese culture will be different from that of their parents, but realizing that that does not make it any less valid. And finally, you have to dig deeper than pho. We'll include some links in the show notes to the dishes Tonie mentioned. And that's it for today, and we'll leave with Tonie's latest single called If I Took a Pill. We'll have the links to stream it in the show notes, as well as links to Tonie's website and some more stuff.
a specter on the horizon, a shadow of who I used to be, a shadow always following me. I daydream till the dawn comes, staring up at the ceiling tiles. If I take some time in the dark, can I make my way out the way I want to? If I took a pill, would it get easier? Would I be different around my friends? If I take a pill, I feel more like myself. If I took a pill, I put myself first. Would I see what my life is worth? If I took a pill, would things get better? Get better. People keep trying to help me, tell me they're here for me. I never reveal what's underneath. While dreaming how my life would end, I realized what my mom said when I was a little boy, that she needed help to find her way back to joy. If I took a pill, would it get easier? Would I be different around my friends? If I took a pill, I feel more like myself. If I took a pill, I put myself first. Would I see what my life is worth? If I took a pill, would things get better? Get better. Girl, know who I am, with or without these pills. Girl, know who I am, with my shadows inside me still.
Hope you enjoyed our conversation with Tonie, and we hope that you'll tune in next week for another nuanced conversation.